I can think of only one Jewish joke about women that I find funny. Two married women back in the old days in a shtetl, a village in some place like Galicia or Romania. It's the dead of winter, snowing, very cold, but the women got to be purified for their husbands after the end of their monthly comings and goings. But there's no mikveh, no ritual bathhouse to cleanse themselves in somewhere nice and warm indoors, because it's a poor little shtetl in the middle of nowhere. So, in the bitter cold, they break a hole in the ice and immerse themselves in the river. And as they're finishing, one of them says, "Can you believe we have to do this every month while our husbands sit at home staying warm?" And they get dressed, and while they're dressing, the other woman can see her home in the distance where her husband is sitting by the fire with his feet up having a schnapps. Suddenly, she lifts her skirts and she squats and she rubs herself in the snow. And the other friend says, "What are you doing? Are you crazy?" And the woman says, "What? Why should he be comfortable?" Come on, it's a joke. You're allowed to laugh. We're here to laugh, amongst other things. You believe in God? No? Why so shy? Oh, don't be embarrassed. This is the modern world now. We can talk about things like this. No one's gonna come after us, beat us, murder us. That's it. Ay, no wonder the world is in the state it's in. What are you, socialists? Communists? You want to hear a funny thing? There are over 40 synagogues in the Maxwell Street shtetl, in the ghetto. The worst area in Chicago, maybe, and that's saying something. Overcrowding and rats and disease and crime. And still, 40 shuls. Tiny little ones in storefronts. Women at the back, of course, behind a curtain. Behind a curtain. What, you got no balconies, or you put us behind the goddamn curtain? What are we, old coats? Something to be ashamed of? Pardon me, I forget, you're strangers. I should watch my language. You don't know what a nice, polite lady I can be. But I'm sure you understand, no one wants to sit behind a curtain. Except for the chatterboxes who want the kibbutz throughout the service. The nice little Yiddish mamas who are so holier than thou and talk about me behind my back. So I stopped going. Okay, sometimes I would go, but only to show my face, on occasion, so as not to lose business. What a nice way to spend a Saturday morning, sitting behind a curtain. And the rabbis, not like the rabbis back home, men who'd been influenced by the Haskalah, the Jewish Enlightenment in Germany. No, these rabbis are Russian and Polish, used to getting their own way. Shtetl rabbis who think they know everything and can tell everyone what to do. It's the Tsar's fault. The Tsar would let the rabbis run the shtetls, so the bossy little so-and-sos would come to America and think nothing's changed. Well, as they used to say, Boże Tsarye Chrani, God save the Tsar. Anyone watching from Russia? Well, we're a long way from Russia. Sorry, I must be confusing you. I'm a little confused myself sometimes. I was born in the Russian Empire. Well, Latvia, now they say. Who can keep track of these things anymore? In a town that was called Golding and is now called Kuldiga. There's a synagogue there. A big, beautiful shul sitting right in the middle of town. It was built a year after I was born, 1875. A symbol of the prosperity of the Jewish community. Before we weren't so prosperous anymore. Before we got squeezed out by the Latvian nationalists. And worse. There's always worse. Very beautiful building, a symbol of the town's prosperity, which the Jews contributed to. Our money, our hard work, our businesses helped build that shul. It's still there if you visit, even if they don't say it used to be a synagogue. Even if all of the decoration that marked it out as a house of worship, and the Torah scrolls, and the Jews, even the Jews are gone. During the war and after the war, what did they use it for? Grain storage. Nice. Isn't that nice? Storage for food for animals in our most holy place. It's a library now with a little sign, a little, what do you call it? A little sign that tells you what it was. But they only put it up a few years ago. They didn't want anyone to know that Jews lived here. They wanted to pretend that Jews never existed at all. Tourists visit and say, "Oh, how beautiful! What a pretty library! What nice internet they got!" What was I talking about? Oh, yes, Jewish traditions. Women. When we came to America and my parents sought a match for me, they went to a typical shtetl shadchan, a matchmaker, an old woman with bad breath and a bad shaitel. New country, old ways. Go figure. I was introduced to a strange young man. I knew right away there was something peculiar about him. He didn't look me in the eye. He's just shy, Golda, Mama said. He muttered and mumbled. He's just modest, Papa said. He never smiled. He's a serious man, said my brother. But I tried to ignore it and focus on the positives. He wasn't bow-legged. He didn't have smallpox scars. He wasn't an imbecile. It could have been worse. There's always worse. And it's not like it is now, endless, picky, picky, picky. This one's too short. This one's not ambitious enough. I want a man with a beard. Pfft. You took what you were given and you were grateful. Otherwise, an unmarried woman is just an odd sock pushed to the back of the drawer and forgotten. No one wanted my opinion anyway. And it didn't matter much in the end. I still found myself alone, raising my children alone, running my business alone. I could say we all find ourselves alone in the end, but in my case, it was true. But don't worry, I'll get to that. I'll tell you another joke. A man agrees to marry a woman the shadchan matches him with, sight unseen. On the wedding day, he meets her. He whispers angrily to the shadchan, "What is this? She's ugly, she's blind, she has hardly any hair." The shadchan says, "Why are you whispering? She's also deaf." Funny, right? It's fun to laugh at this poor, unfortunate woman. I bet he wasn't such a catch either. So, me and my catch, we had 5 children. It wasn't like it is now. Should we have 2 so little Timmy isn't a spoiled only child? Is 3 too many? What about the school system? What about climate change? I didn't want 5 children. Who wants 5 children? I had 6. And then God saw fit to relieve me of one of them by way of scarlet fever. He maybe thought I could manage more easily with 5. So, me and the children living in this tiny apartment above the hardware store we owned. Where's my husband? You're probably wondering where he is. Don't worry, we'll get there. 1 son, 4 daughters. Daughter 1 is very pretty, but not so smart. Daughter 2 is smart, but not so pretty. Daughter 3 is a little pretty, but moody and unpredictable. Daughter 4 is a beautiful dreamer with a head in the clouds, a little like Son. Son is very quiet. Son went to Cheder, Hebrew school, but a bad one. The rabbis were cruel, violent men, bitter, dried-out old husks from Russia. They beat all the boys. They beat my son, especially, for daydreaming. He came home one day with a tuchus so sore he could hardly sit down. And then, one day, one of the other boys from the class died of a brain hemorrhage. One of the nasty old husks hit him in the head with a wooden plank. He was only 8 years old. Now Son goes to a radical young Bundist who teaches Torah to make a little money in between socialist meetings and labor strikes. He maybe slips in a little Marx into his lessons about the Midrash, but he doesn't beat his students. If anything, he's too soft. And besides, he's handsome. Back home, only the boys learned Hebrew. Why bother teaching girls? What do they need with prayer and study? After Son started taking lessons from the Bundist, my daughters demanded to know why they couldn't learn Torah. I started to tell them that only boys need religious study, and I realized I sounded just like my own mother. So now we got a little Hebrew school in the back room. Everyone in my town spoke German or Russian. We spoke German in my house. Okay, I speak Yiddish too, ein bisschen. Oh, excuse me, a bissel, a bit. It's almost German, but worse. And I speak Russian, but only when I must. Did you hear? The Tsar is dead now. Shot to death in a basement with his family. A terrible way to go. But on the other hand, he killed many people himself. Bože carje hrani. Anyway, back then, no one spoke Latvian. Okay, some Latvians spoke Latvian, but you didn't want to get mixed up with those Latvian peasant types. Not if you were Jewish. You'd end up in a ditch, or worse. There's always worse. Then again, you didn't want to get mixed up with the Russians either. The Germans, not so bad. Well, back then. Not later, of course, but everyone knows that. Mama and Papa didn't have the money to send us to gymnasium, but I read lots of books. Not that anyone took any notice. They don't like me. The other women in the neighborhood, the real Yiddish mamas, they speak Yiddish to each other, going in and out of each other's houses all day long, cooing over each other's babies, gossiping. They don't like me. I don't coo over their babies. I don't speak Yiddish with them, and I don't give them credit in my store. They call me the Cossack, which is offensive. They talk about me behind my back, saying she thinks she's one of those fancy German Jews. Ah, they wouldn't know a fancy German Jew if one kicked them in the head. Where was I? What was I talking about? Whenever I wanted to smoke, I had to do it out the back of the shop and make sure no one saw me. If they saw you smoking on the street, they would think you were a prostitute. And if customers saw me smoking in the shop, they would just walk right out. No one wants to buy a hammer from a prostitute. Of course, the men could smoke wherever they wanted. And then, later on, everyone could smoke wherever they wanted. Sidewalks, stores, airplanes even. I always thought that was disgusting. All that dirty air in that little tin can. And now you can't smoke anywhere. Don't tell anyone. Oh, I know what you're thinking. It's bad for you. You might get cancer. What do you want from me? When you've seen what I've seen, what's a cigarette or two? When you've done deals with the mob and had to outrun federal agents, who's afraid of lung cancer? Besides, I've been dead 50 years already. Did I mention that? Maybe not. I guess this is going to be a more serious evening than we thought. Here's another joke. A man is introduced to a woman by the shotgun. She says to the man, "Well, what do you think? Isn't she pretty?" "Sure," says the man, "she's kind of pretty, but she has a limp." "Yes," says the shotgun, "but only when she walks." Funny? I'm splitting my sides laughing at the joke about the disabled woman. It's no life. Raising 5 children alone, running this store. No family, no husband to help. Not that my husband was a help, may he rest in peace. But, you say, at least I got a store and not a push cart. At least I'm not that old woman on the corner over there, begging for charity. But, you say, I could be like those women who went west to those godforsaken places with no Jews, where you got to live inside with animals. But, you say, you could be like the poor wretches who exchanged an agreement to work for the passage to South America, not knowing they would end up trapped in brothels, or worse. I don't know what's worse, but there's always something. You hear stories. Gittel Levitsky's cousin, for instance. Buenos Aires, they say. Ay. But you say, at least you don't have a husband who beats you, who drinks, gambles, runs around with women. No husband at all is better than a husband like that. Which is true. It wasn't much of a life, but it was okay. I did what I wanted, more or less. I raised my children as I wanted, more or less. And we got by. Not with a lot, but we got by. What was I talking about? Oh, right, Chicago. Isn't such a bad place if you don't mind smoke, noise, smells, filth, and people. And such violence these days. The mob, savages. As if the Chicago River isn't dirty enough already. You got bodies floating around in it. I found a dead man outside the shop one morning, full of bullet holes. It's bad for business, bodies on the street. Bloody Maxwell, they call it. More murders than anywhere else in the city, in a city with a lot of murders. The big boss even came down to Maxwell Street one day, got driven down in his fancy Packard in the middle of the winter, got out and swarmed around to inspect his territory like a slumlord. Not too tall, but big, zaftig, jowls, thick lips, big scar down his left cheek, dresses, gaudy, patent leather shoes, a fur coat, and a gold watch chain. He should have been ashamed of himself, looking like $1,000,000 and all that poverty. But who can I complain to? Police? Corrupt. Alderman? Corrupt. Mayor? Possibly the most goddamn corrupt son of a bitch of them all. The garbage doesn't get collected, the streets are filthy and rotted, my children get chased home from school. But who can I complain to? You come to Chicago, you're on your own. I keep a baseball bat in the back of the store. Anyone gives me trouble, I come out swinging like Babe Ruth. I tell the children, keep an eye out. Daughter 2 and daughter 3, they got good at chasing away hoodlums. I raised them tough, mean. Daughter 1, daughter 4, not so good at that kind of thing. Son is small, so he's useless. It could be worse. At least we don't have Cossacks in Chicago. But in the South, they got Cossacks. They might not take orders from the Tsar, but they still ride horses through villages, terrorizing poor people. And these American Cossacks, they wear bed sheets. Who ever heard of such a thing? Prohibition. A period where the United States government thought it was a good idea to keep everyone from drinking alcohol because it would be good for us. Ha! The Goyish ladies at the Christian Temperance Union want everyone to give up drinking, to assimilate, become productive members of society. Real Americans celebrate the 4th of July. They came in their big hats and their long skirts to my store in 1919, just before Prohibition passed, marching up and down the street, knocking on doors and bothering everybody. Well, I'll tell you, women peddling temperance got about as much luck in a Jewish neighborhood as a Jehovah's Witness. Huh. But we're cleaning up America, they say. Make alcohol illegal, and the husbands will stay home at night. They'll use their paychecks to feed their children. They'll stop beating their wives. They wanted us to know that they too had read the Bible, and they had convinced themselves that the Old Testament dictates that we Hebrews were meant to drink grape juice and not wine. One day someone's telling you how to read your own holy texts. The next, they're turning your synagogue into a grain store. They even have the nerve to say, we want to welcome Jewesses into our movement. Jewesses. I tell them, just because some people can't hold their liquor, why should I suffer? Why should my people suffer? We came here to the land of democracy and freedom to be told we can't drink alcohol? What about the Constitution? First wine goes, and then what? Cigarettes? Coca-Cola? What about the free market? What about capitalism? It's a threat to the American way of life. And all the excitement, I forget the Bundist has come to tutor the children. He clears his throat and says, but ladies, that's just it. That's just what I say. Capitalism, that's just it. It's not alcohol that is to blame for the drunkenness and the decay of the family. It is capitalism. It is the misery of the inhuman conditions under which the worker must toil. Of course it drives him to drink. One of the ladies says to me, is he an anarchist? I thank the ladies for their visit and wish them better luck next time. They tell me that it is my duty as a wife and a mother to support this cause for women and children everywhere. I tell them to mind their own goddamn business. One of them turns to me and says, you'll regret your attitude if the government doesn't ban alcohol. Things will get worse. Chicago will be awash with sin and vice. I think the joke is on them, l'chaim. You want to make something more popular? Make it illegal. In 1920, prohibition passes. The Goyish ladies get their way. We got 2 local Yiddish papers, one religious, the other socialist. They never agree on anything, but they can agree that prohibition is bad for business and bad for the Jews. That the only people who want it are Meshuggah Goyim, who want to stop all the sinning, and racists who want an excuse to bully the Catholics, the blacks, and the Jews. Besides, you think it was bad before with the shootings and the bodies? A few years go by, and now, with all the bootleggers and the ram-runners, we got even more shootings, even more bodies. Bombings, even. Crime has gone through the roof. You want to hear a funny thing? The government had to let rabbis distribute wine from their synagogues to Jewish families. You know, wine for religious purposes. Shabbos and Pesach and so on. Each family gets 10 gallons a year. Of course, you know what happened then. All sorts of people who aren't Jewish joining synagogues, rabbis selling sacramental wine on the sly, people becoming rabbis who aren't rabbis. Because what does the government know from rabbis? What a good idea, banning alcohol. What would you do? What would you do if you were alone, left to raise 5 hungry children? So much they eat. What can I tell them? Eat less. Stop eating. Get to work in the sweatshop down the street so you can ruin your eyesight, your back, and your future. Do you know the girls working at the sewing machines all day? They suffer from a tilted pelvis. Who can walk with a tilted pelvis? You can't. They take you out the back and they shoot you like an old horse. Before he died, my husband, Itzik, took out a loan so we could buy this store. I told him not to. I said, the terms are not good. The lenders are not to be trusted. He said, don't worry, Golda. They're good Jewish people. Sure, good Jewish people swindling other good Jewish people. There's something like this in every neighborhood. The Italians cheat the Italians. The Hungarians cheat the Hungarians. The Chinese cheat the Chinese. When you get off the boat and you got no money and no English, people say, sure, we'll get you set up. Itzik said, I asked the rabbi, and the rabbi said it was okay. Of course the rabbi said it was okay. He gets a cut from the loan shark. He didn't listen. He never listened. And he was sick, very unpredictable. One day up, the next day down. One day he can lasso the moon. The next, he doesn't get out of bed. Who lets a person like that make a serious decision that will affect their whole family? But on the other hand, who listens to the wife? Now I got a debt hanging over my head. And what happens if we don't pay? We lose the store. And worse, probably. There's always worse. Okay, now we're finally getting somewhere. You are probably wondering where all this is going, but we are on our way. So, what do? You know that 10 gallons of wine? I sold it. Everyone did. Everyone needed money. I'm not stupid. I did it little by little. But still, they heard about it. The thugs, an Italian one and a silent Jewish one, sent by the show-off in the fur coat. In nice suits, they come to my store. They say, Mrs., we hear you've been selling wine. You should have asked us first. We could have helped you. Sure, some help. They're walking around and they see some copper piping I have in the corner. This is very nice, Mrs., very nice. I say they're just pipes. Yeah, but nice copper ones, not lead ones, they say. Okay, so they're made of copper, I say. Do you know what people use these for, Mrs.? Stills. What? What are stills? You know, the things they use to make alcohol. You need copper to do it, but the feds are starting to confiscate them. Well, I said, I got more in the basement. Oh, they say. How much more? Who wants to know? I say. What do you say we find some buyers for you? And so I say, being a supplier for something like this, something illegal, it's a risk to my livelihood, to my children, my poor children who got no father and only a poor immigrant mother with a small shop. You want a poor Jewish immigrant mother with 5 children to end up in jail? Is that what you want? Don't you have a heart? Don't you have mothers? And they said, okay, enough with the melodrama already. And of course, if you're selling something else, we can find buyers for that too. I sold all the wine, I say. It's all gone. Yeah, they say, but what if you decide to make more? And besides, we'll give you a bonus. I said, what kind of a bonus? They said, for every order you fill for copper piping for the bootleggers, we'll give you something extra. I said, double. They said, what? I said, double. I'm doubling the price. They said, no, come on. That's no way to run a business. I said, I already got a business. They pay double. They said, no. I said, fine. Go somewhere else. They said, you don't want to treat us like that. You want to be nice to us. I said, what? What you gonna do? Machine gun me in the street, blow up my shop? Fine. I've had worse. I have seen Russian Cossacks. I have seen Latvian peasants terrorizing my family. I've seen the hull of a stinking ship where people died of cholera. You think you can do worse? Fine. Do it. Do it, you sons of bitches, or leave me be. I had an okay life before you came along. Not great, but okay. You won't make this worth my while? Fine, go away. They said, you drive a hard bargain, lady. You're worse than a union leader. And so we struck a deal. The bootleggers paid double. So I started making my own alcohol. A little wine, a little gin, a little whiskey. One thing leads to another, and before you know it, you're no better than Mayor Lansky. But times were hard, and I had this debt hanging over my head, don't forget. And with the money from the moonshine and the money from the copper piping, I started to be able to pay off those bastards. Pardon my language. But then I had to answer to my own children. I told them, when I was your age, all across Russia, the Tsar did the same thing. He tried to keep Jews from owning taverns because he didn't want us getting the nice, sober peasants drunk. And what is this, Russia? No, it's America. But instead of Cossacks with orders from the Tsar, we got men in bed sheets. And we gotta stop them. Stop who, Mama? They said to me. The American Cossacks, the government, everyone who tells anyone else what to do. It's our duty as Jews. You know the saying? You lie down with dogs, you get up with fleas. No, I think I got fleas. I can't get rid of these people now, the thugs. My children say, Mama, why are those men at the door again? At first, you want to avoid them. Then you can't avoid them, so you see if you can deal with them without getting into too much trouble. Then you think, well, if I'm already involved, I might as well get something out of it. But before you know it, they're bringing their boss to your store. It all started when they came to pick up their order, and they started getting a little comfortable around me because they think, nice little Jewish lady, a nice little Yiddish mama. And what do people do when they get a little too comfortable? They fetch. They complain about their Meshuggah mob boss. He's unpredictable. He lashes out. He's moody. He's twitchy. He can't remember things. He has visions even. And sometimes he's been speaking in a funny accent. Well, first I think maybe the Meshuggah is just sick in the head, sick in the body, who knows. But then they tell me it all started when he claimed he was being followed by a shadowy figure with long arms and coal black eyes. That's when he started acting funny. That's when they started getting scared. Now, I'm not normally a superstitious woman, but you hear this kind of thing and you can't help but think, maybe it's a dibbuk. Maybe he's possessed by a demon. Okay, we're in America now, the modern world, with all the mechanical things and the automobiles and the electric lights. But a man sees a demon with coal black eyes and long arms, and then he starts acting funny. What can it be but a dibbuk? In the Kabbalah, a dibbuk is a restless, sinful spirit who wanders the earth and possesses a body, maybe to take revenge. So I take the Jewish one aside and I say, pal, I think I might know what's wrong with your boss. What do you mean? He says, suspicious. I think it might be a dibbuk, I say. A what? I thought you were Jewish. You don't know what a dibbuk is? I know what a dibbuk is, lady. I just didn't think I heard you right. You heard right. I think he is possessed by a dibbuk. How do you figure? He says, squinting at me, a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. I tell him, You think these things are only in the Kabbalah, but they happen sometimes. A girl back in my village, Shayna, she got sick, and they thought maybe she was pretending because she didn't want to marry Herschel, the man the shadchan found for her. But it went on, and Shayna took to her bed, sweating, twitching, visions. And her parents begged her to stop it because it was a good match. They thought she was faking it. And Herschel started getting impatient, and the begging turned to lecturing, and the lecturing turned to shouting. But she got worse. She writhed and thrashed and started speaking in a strange voice. So the parents called for a rabbi, and sure enough, she was possessed by a dibbuk. Turns out it was Herschel's first wife, Velvula, God rest her soul. She was angry because she hadn't even been cold in her grave a year when he started shopping around for a new wife. And the rabbi could not get rid of her. He prayed and he prayed. He brought in a minyan of the necessary 10 pious men. The whole family lit candles and fasted. And still the first wife would not leave the young girl's body. And of course, at this point, the whole community is involved because everybody loves a circus, right? Everyone is coming by the house to see what they can do. Everyone but Herschel, of course, who is frightened out of his wits by his dead wife, Velvula. I knew Shayna because I was only a girl myself at the time. We used to play together when we were children. And I had known Velvula too, who was friends with my family. She would give me a few rubles from time to time to help her look after the children. So I came to see what was what, to see if I could do anything to relieve poor Shayna's misery. And, of course, because I was nosy, like everyone else. It was a very bad atmosphere in the room, very bad. The wind was howling outside and battering at the windows. Shayna's eyes had rolled back in her head, and the sweat was pouring off her. The candles were flickering, and the floor was shaking. The room had grown so icy cold, I could see my breath. Well, the long and the short of it is, I bargained with the dead wife. No one can resist a bargain, not even a dibbuk. I said, Velvula, what would it take for you to leave this poor girl in peace? This isn't her fault. She doesn't even want your husband. And I said to Shayna, my poor friend, who was somewhere deep inside, I said, Shayna, will you promise not to marry that man? Then his poor dead wife and you can be at peace. Then the room grew silent, and the dibbuk disappeared. Of course, Shayna still refused to marry Herschel, even after the dibbuk was laid to rest. She was too frightened, but I don't think she liked him anyway, so it was a good excuse to find someone else. Everyone was happy, except Herschel. The Jewish one, he calls the Italian one over. He tells him what I just said, the story. You mean he's possessed by Satan, or what? Says the Italian. Not exactly Satan, I say, but he could be possessed. You know so much about this, he says, looking kind of nervous. Maybe you should perform an exorcism. I look at them both. Me? I say.